So we are Brianna Stevens, HR Consulting. These are a number of the things that we can handle for your business. So you can think of us as like a bolt-on HR department. So if you have HR tasks that you need assistance with, either because you're short-staffed or maybe your staff don't have this expertise, we can handle things such as compensation, compliance with state and federal laws, employee handbooks or policies or procedures, which we'll be talking about today, recruitment, onboarding and offboarding employees, training, and HRIS and applicant tracking system implementation, as well as employee relations issues that might come up. And if you have any other human resources needs, likely that is something we can handle as well. So just ask. I am Rihanna Doherty, and I will be leading this workshop today on policies and procedures. So policies and procedures often kind of get a bad rap. They can be quite boring and not a very exciting thing to talk about, but I actually really like them. Especially now with what I have learned, that helps to kind of simplify them and just make it a much easier process. And it's kind of almost like a magic trick with what policies are often known as, and then the transformation I'll show you today. So first, why are they important? Why does this matter? And we probably all can acknowledge that policies are hugely important, and yet often we don't give them the time and energy that they need to be well written or well done or even up to date. So one of the main reasons policies are important is, of course, they can protect you from a legal standpoint, right? If something with your business was called into question, you could say, oh yeah, we have a policy on that, right? Or here's our policy on that. It can also be used to support disciplinary action. So if you are disciplining an employee who has violated a policy, right, that can be kind of an easy way to support that documentation or to have that conversation with that employee. You can say, we're talking about this because you violated the policy on XYZ, right? And you could include that in your written documentation. Or if, the unfortunate thing were to happen and you had to terminate an employee, you could state that in the termination letter, right? That this employee was being terminated because they violated such and such company policy 3 times or something, right? So it gives you some good grounds to stand on for those kinds of actions. It also, of course, lets employees know what to do and what not to do. So employees can read the company policy and know how to handle certain things. So that, of course, is very important. Also, procedures in particular can help with continuity of work. So, your office manager leaves and a new office manager comes on, and nobody else in the office has any clue what that person did or how they did their tasks. Having those procedures can be essential and allow a new person to come in and just, really run with things right away if there's that written documentation of how they handled their tasks. And it also provides consistency. So if you have multiple people completing the same work and they can review that procedure and follow the steps outlined to complete things in the same way as everybody else. So we can see that they are really important, and yet we often put them on the back burner, right? You likely have had this experience. It's like, I could work on this policy that needs to be updated or needs to be written, or I could do any of 500 other things, right? And probably all of those 500 other things end up coming first. And we put the policies on hold. because people don't tend to particularly like writing them. So why is that? What is wrong with policies? Why do they get a bad rap? Well, oftentimes they're confusing, which causes a lot of problems. There are many reasons they're confusing, and one in particular is they're often written kind of in legalese, right? Or this legal language, and many employees don't understand what the policy even says, right? And that's really problematic because, of course, if we want employees to be able to follow a policy and be in compliance with it, they probably need to understand it. And policies often also contain too much information, which makes it really hard to find what you're looking for, or not enough information, and quite often the wrong information. They're also often unorganized, especially if there's too much information included in the policy. It can be really hard to find what you're needing. And then because most people don't like writing policies and tend to put them on the back burner, they are often outdated, and so the information might not even be accurate anymore if it was, written 20 years ago. So what is the solution? What can we do about it? So this is what I'm going to show you today in just a matter of minutes. And of course, there's so much more to know about writing policies and procedures, but we are really going to get to the basics of how you can get a policy and procedure drafted, today, even if you wanted, after you left this session. So we are going to simplify the language because we want all employees to understand what it says, right? We're not trying to trick people, or there's really no reason to make it more sophisticated or formal than it needs to be. There's really no benefit to that. And it's much better that everybody is able to read it and understand it. We're also going to organize the information and reduce the amount of content in the policy to really what is just essential to make it easy to find what we need to find in the policy. And we're going to make sure to include the right information and only the right information. Oftentimes what happens is we get kind of this conglomeration of policy and procedure and task and other things all included in the policy document because people don't always know what should be in each document. And so it kind of becomes a catch-all, and then that just makes it all the more confusing trying to sift through that various information that serves different purposes. Okay, and as a result of this, your policies will be less overwhelming. So it'll be easier to, approach a new policy because you'll know kind of where to start and how to get it written. It'll also be easier to understand. And then you can have greater compliance because your employees will know what the policy means. Information will be easier to locate for people needing to, refresh themselves on what the policy is. And it will be much easier to maintain so you can keep the policy up to date. Okay, so this is how we're going to do this. Is when you go to draft a policy, the first thing you're going to think about is the management decisions, right? Or if, maybe you have a management team, or maybe it's just you, or maybe you're writing a policy, right, because of a state law or something. Either way, you're going to think, what is it that has been decided? And you're going to make a list of each of those things, and each of those decisions will become a heading. And then once you have those headings, you'll add any additional information that's necessary to understand that decision. So the example I've used today is a COVID vaccination policy, and that's not that we are, either for or against this or anything, but rather it's just very relevant to the times right now. And many of you, may be needing to do this with your business. So it's just sort of a relevant example for today. So you should be able to use the phrase, management has decided that, and then fill in the blanks, right? And we won't actually keep that, that phrase in the actual policy, but just for the sake of drafting it and thinking about what to include, that can be really helpful. So it could be, management has decided that all employees must be vaccinated against COVID-19. Management has decided that, vaccination can occur during your work hours and you get paid for it. Management has decided that, we will grant exceptions for medical conditions or religious beliefs. Management has decided that employees who do not comply with the policy may face disciplinary action. So that's how you would come up with this initial list, is just thinking, what are all of the decisions that you or the management team or the state or whoever it is that is requiring this, what are all of those decisions? And once you have listed all of those decisions, you're ready to move on. So for the sake of the example today, I've just picked one of those to kind of show you what would come next. So we have this heading, vaccination may occur during your regularly scheduled work hours and is compensable time. And then if you think, what else would an employee need to know about that, right? Then we'll just add that in down below this heading. So perhaps we want them to let us know when it is they're going to do that, right? So they can do it during work hours, but we probably don't want them to just not show up to work the next day because they're getting the shot, right? So we want them to let us know or let their supervisor know and choose a time with them when it's not going to interfere with your business, right? We don't want them to just miss a meeting to go get the shot. So that would be important information to include here. So we have our heading, and then we would have any additional information the employee would need to know. And you would go through and do that for each of the headings for each management decision. So next is the procedure. And the procedure is more of an internal document, for you and your employees' use to outline how to actually go about completing a task, especially a task that is related to a policy you have. So to draft this, you would start with 2 columns. And on the left, you'll list the person who's going to complete that action. And on the right, list the action to be done. And then once we have that, we'll just add in any exceptions to the rule or any time where that might not be the case. So here's an example on the left, right? And you could just start with a basic spreadsheet or a Word document with 2 columns, whatever is easiest for you, and just start plugging in the information. And you'll start with, the first step that needs to be taken and then move down in order until you have completed everything for that process. So here's just an example of a few items that might be included for a policy on COVID vaccinations. So perhaps the executive director will send the policy to staff to let them know that this is the policy. And then staff, once they are vaccinated, will need to send their proof of vaccination to the office manager. And then the office manager perhaps will, store that information in a confidential file, and maybe they have a spreadsheet and they're marking off everyone who has turned it in, right? And of course, you can imagine other items in the list that you might add on there as well. So this is how you would just start out drafting that procedure. And then once you have all of the items here, it's really simple to just clean this up and move it into a final form, which might look more like this, right? And of course, you can give it a nice heading, and the date maybe that it was written or approved. So you'll see we just kind of got rid of the grid lines from the spreadsheet, and we've numbered these in numerical order. And then I've added an exception in this case, right? So now the executive director sends the policy to staff. The staff send the proof of vaccination to the office manager. Or if they are opting to not get vaccinated and they believe they qualify for an exception, then it says here in A, if requesting an exception, send a request form to the office manager. And then again, the office manager stores the proof of vaccination in a confidential file. So here in a matter of minutes, right, you could have kind of at least the bones or a starting place for both a policy and procedure. So that really is what I wanted to show you today, and hopefully takes some of that confusion out of policies. I think you can see how, just how clear and easy it is to read and how simple, and you can find all of the information really quickly. And it's not such an overwhelming thing that you kind of like put it off because you don't know where to get started or what to include, right? It just gives you a really clear framework to know what to include, and just makes it so much less overwhelming of a task, right? That it doesn't need to be put on the back burner, because you can sit down and within half an hour really have the majority of that put together. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have questions about writing policies or procedures. Of course, there is much more to know, or much more you can do with it or learn about it. And also, we are happy to also draft policies and procedures for you as well. And if you need more support with any other HR tasks that you might have, you can contact us here. We have Brianna's email and phone number available, and you can also find more information on our website. Go ahead and stop the share so I can see you. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've actually been really working on refining and developing our policy and procedure manual. But I feel like there's almost a difference between the policy and the procedure. Do you feel like it's important to kind of separate like the rules versus just how you do it?
Yeah, I mean, typically they are separated out from each other, mostly for clarity, because they kind of serve a different purpose. A lot of policies do have them combined, honestly, and don't really differentiate between the two. So it could be kind of up to you what works best. I like the simplicity of having them separate, because then they can both be a really nice, clear, and organized document with those separate purposes. So, if you're wanting to know, like, what is the rule or what is required, right, you would go to the policy document. And if you're wondering, like, how do I actually do this? Like, what are the steps that need to be taken? You would go to the procedure document.
Kind of what I